The courtroom wasn't occupied by individuals that morning. It was occupied by anguish. Not the kind that shouts or rattles the walls. This anguish was silent, but heavy. It hung in the air like heavy smoke. After an inferno, the benches were packed. Reporters, family members, strangers who had followed the story from a distance, and people who just wanted to witness what was about to happen. Yet, despite all the whispers and breaths, it was silent. The kind of silence that makes your heart beat louder. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too loud. The gentle whir of the air conditioner was thunderous. The highly polished floor mirrored the weak light of the morning sun that filtered through the large windows. Outside, life continued. Cars moved, birds chirped, people laughed. But in here, time was at a standstill. All you heard was the whisper of silent tears and the tick, tick of the judge's antique wooden clock. Every second took an eternity. Seated at the front of the room was Kody Brown. He did not appear to be the man the world used to know from television. His face was gaunt, his eyes were sunken, and his hands were clasped so tightly together that his knuckles were white. He was as if he were attempting to grasp something that had already passed through his hands. His confident stance was gone. His shoulders were slumped, his jaw clenched, his eyes cast down. He wasn't looking at anyone. Not the judge, not the jury, not the ones who used to call him family. Sitting across the room was Janelle Brown. Her hands were shaking, but she refused to drop what she was holding. A crumpled photograph of Garrison Brown. Their son, her boy. The corners of the photo were frayed, wrinkled from too frequent handling. The colors had faded ever so slightly. The sort of fading that occurs when a photograph has been handled too fondly. Janelle's thumb stroked delicately over Garrison's smiling face, as if she was afraid his smile would vanish if she blinked. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not cry out. She had cried enough in the darkness, in the rooms where no one would ever hear her. Today her hurt was silent, but it was boisterous enough to fill the whole courtroom. Behind her, Christine, Mary and Robin sat on the same bench but appeared like strangers. A family once joined in love and craziness, now broken, quiet, and worlds apart, even though they were just inches apart. Christine's lips pressed together so hard they were almost white. Mary's hands were clasped tight in prayer, or maybe in guilt. Robin stared at the floor, twisting a tissue in her fingers. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look each other in the eye. The judge, a tall man with tired but compassionate eyes, slowly surveyed the courtroom. His eyes were strong but not unkind. He had witnessed tragedy. But this was different. This was more than a matter of law. This was about a family that was shattered. This was about a life taken. And it was about to come out before everyone. The judge pushed his glasses up onto the bridge of his nose and leaned forward slightly. His tone sliced through the quiet like a knife through glass. Today, he said hesitantly, is not punishment. It is not blame. It is about truth. It is about confronting pain that no one wanted to confront. His words didn't ring out. They fell, they landed hard on each shoulder in the room. Kody moved in his seat, but didn't raise his head. Janelle's eyes were shut, holding the photograph just a little tighter. Christine took a deep breath as if bracing herself for a storm she knew was already approaching. Fluorescent lights in the courtroom hummed softly. A reporter's pen moved softly over paper. Even these small noises sounded like thunder in this space, so delicate. The judge hesitated, long enough for the power of his words to hang in the air like dust. This case isn't on paper, he went on. It's on faces, on hearts, on years of unspoken words and spoken words. Today, every human in this room will have to confront something they've been afraid of running from. An undercurrent of feelings swept through the room, not observed, but perceived. Someone sniffled softly in the back of the room. A woman hid her mouth behind her hand. A man looked down, concealing his tear-streaked eyes. This wasn't a trial about strangers. This was personal. This was raw. Everyone who had ever loved, fought with, or stood by Garrison was in that room. And on a deep-down level, each of them knew they were holding a piece of this hurt. The clerk got up and read the name. The Garrison Brown case. The name itself cracked the room open. It wasn't a name. It was a memory. It was laughter that once filled rooms. It was dreams unfinished. It was words unspoken. Christine covered her mouth. Mary turned away. Janelle pressed the photo against her chest, as if she held him for one last time. Even Kody, who had so desperately struggled to keep everything contained, winced when his son's name was uttered out loud in a courtroom. The bailiff spoke up. "All rise," he said. But they were already standing. Not in response to the command, but because the significance of the moment compelled them to. When the judge again took his seat, the room did the same. But it didn't sit right that they were sitting in a courtroom anymore. It sat like they were sitting in a graveyard of words unsaid. Kody's eyes finally rose. Slowly, tentatively, and the first thing he saw was the photo in Janelle's hand. Garrison's smile. That same warm, solid smile. A smile that now cut through him like a knife. He blinked fast, his breath trembling. He'd been in this room 1,000 times in his head, going over the things he wanted to do differently. But this wasn't a dream, and real hurt more. The judge stared at him. Kody's jaw clenched. "Mr. Brown," said the judge gently yet firmly, "I want you to listen to me. Before we do this, I want you to know something. This is not a trial like you've ever experienced. This is a showdown with the truth." Truth. A word so diminutive. But on this day it was like a mountain. Across the aisle, Janelle eased the photograph into her lap. She did not glance at Kody. Not yet. She didn't trust her heart not to shatter all over again. If she did. Behind them, the benches dissolved. The rest of the world didn't count anymore. The cameras, the press, the rumors. None of it counted. It only mattered that a young man's silence occupied the room more loudly than a voice ever could. The judge went on, his voice firm. "The truth will hurt, but only it has the power to free a heart. This room will not be filled with apologies. It will be filled with what ought to have been spoken years before this day." Kody swallowed hard. The air was heavy, his throat hurt, but no words would issue. Janelle quietly wiped her cheeks. Christine put a shaking hand to her breast. Robin went on twisting the very same tissue until it threatened to rip. The judge then beckoned to the stand. "We shall start." The one tap of the gavel resonated in the chamber. It was as if a thunderclap. And with that sound, the fragile wall that had kept everyone's emotions in check began to crack. One tear rolled down Kody's cheek. He didn't brush it off. For the first time in a very long time, he didn't attempt to be strong. Janelle kept her eyes forward. She could feel the beat of her heart in her throat. Behind her, Christine whispered something too soft to hear. The photo of Garrison rested quietly on her palms. He glowed softly under the light of the courtroom, as if part of him remained present. The judge inhaled slowly. Every head in that room bowed. The narrator could state, because this wasn't just another case. This was an open wound, and everybody in that room had been a part of it. The truth was finally emerging. And none of them, not Kody, not Janelle, not Christine, not Mary, not Robin, would be leaving this room the same. The hurt in the courtroom was no longer hidden. It was breathing. It was alive. It was waiting. The ring of the judge's gavel had hardly ceased when the clerk's voice echoed out the first name. "Janelle Brown, come forward." The words hung suspended, like smoke. Janelle pulled herself from the bench. The ground beneath her legs seemed to weigh down on her, resisting her movement. The picture of Garrison Brown was still pressed against her body. The same position she held him in as a small child who cowered from thunderstorms. The courtroom heard her approach the stand. Each step echoed. Each breath sounded louder. She placed the photograph gently on the edge of the wooden witness box. For a brief moment she ran her fingers over it again, a nervous, motherly touch, before sitting down. The bailiff swore her in. She nodded silently. Her throat was too tight for words. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Brown, whenever you're ready." Janelle breathed in shakily. She looked at the picture, then at the crowd of eyes gazing back at her. She could feel their weight crushing against her breast. But it wasn't their censure she was afraid of. It was the truth within her that she had been pushing aside for so long.
He just wanted love.
She started to say gently. Her voice cracked, and the microphone caught the break, filling the room with her pain. He wanted to feel heard. He didn't need money. He didn't need big speeches. He just needed his family.
He needed us.
She swallowed, blinking fast to keep the tears from falling. But one tear escaped anyway. It slid down her cheek and fell onto the wooden stand. Garrison had a way of faking that he was fine. He smiled when his heart ached. He joked when he was alone. I witnessed it. I noticed the signs. I felt like something was amiss. But I reminded myself that it would be all right. I reminded myself that he was resilient. Her knuckles whitened where they grasped the edges of the stand. I was wrong. The final word was spoken in a whisper, but everyone in the courtroom heard it. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He looked down, refusing to meet her gaze. Janelle glanced at him for an instant, not angrily, not even reproachfully, but in stark, empty sadness. I believed we were giving him everything, but what we actually gave him was silence.
He gave him distance.
We gave him a quiet house full of noise. The courtroom was paralyzed. Journalists put down pens. Robin looked down at her lap. Mary's lips shook, mumbling a silent prayer once more. Do you know what it's like? Janelle went on, her voice building power through hurt. To sit beside your phone each night, waiting for him to text you, and then realizing he's given up. Her tears landed harder now. He gave up because he didn't believe anyone cared enough to hear. There was a soft sob from the rear of the courtroom. Someone wiped his face. Even the judge slowly breathed out, attempting to calm the emotion that filled the room. I will carry that with me for the rest of my life, Janelle said, gazing at the photograph. All mothers want to guard their child. I was unable to guard mine. Not from the silence. Not from the isolation. And that will never leave me. For an instant the courtroom was silent. Kody tightened his fists so much his knuckles went white. The judge cleared his throat quietly, his own voice softer now. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Janelle stood up slowly. Her body trembled as if she'd just hiked a mountain she never wanted to conquer. She took the photograph, holding it to her heart once more, and sat back down without glancing over her shoulder. Christine was next. Christine Brown, please come forward. She hesitated briefly. Christine was not only a witness, she was a woman who had loved Garrison as her own son. She had seen the sparkle in his eyes, and she had watched it fade. She stood, her knees weak, and walked to the stand. Her hands shook as she held a folded letter. Garrison's letter. She had read it dozens of times, but reading it here felt like walking barefoot through broken glass. After taking the oath, she sat down slowly, clutching the letter like it was the last piece of him she had left. The judge nodded gently. Christine, whenever you're ready. Christine drew in a quivering deep breath. Her voice was low but quivering. Garrison wasn't only Janelle's son. He was mine. He was this giant light in the house. Always smiling. Always attempting to make people laugh. He had this ability to make bad days tolerable. She blinked back tears, and stared at the crumpled paper in her hands. But I also saw the seconds no one else would look at. I saw the melancholy behind that smile. She unfolded the letter slowly. The rustling of the paper was the only noise in the courtroom. He wrote this a few months before everything occurred, she said, her voice breaking on the final words. Her hands shook as she started to read. Sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into a room, and nobody is listening. I don't want to be a burden, so I clam up. I love my family, but I don't think they look at me anymore. Christine's voice shattered entirely. She stopped, having her mouth, fighting to keep it together. Tears streamed down her face. He felt invisible, she whispered. Like he didn't count anymore. The words crashed through the room like a wave. Even those who didn't know Garrison personally felt the pain. The heartache was no longer a personal matter. It was something the whole room bore collectively. Christine dropped the letter and stared straight at Kody. We saw the signs, she said. We saw them and we turned our heads. We were too busy, too distracted. too comfortable. And now, there's no turning back. Kody gritted his teeth, clenching his lip, but the tears flowed out nonetheless. He attempted to avert his gaze, but Christine's words were shackles, drawing him to the truth he had evaded. If we'd listened, she went on. If we'd just halted everything for 1 second and actually listened, perhaps this would not be the tale we're sharing today. The judge moved in her seat, visibly shaken. The bailiff looked down at the floor. Even the reporters, present only for a story, appeared shaken. Christine laid the letter down gently on the stand and pressed her hands against her chest. Garrison was heard. She breathed. Garrison was seen. She put her face in her hands and let out a little fractured cry. It wasn't the sort of crying you conceal. It was the sort of crying that happens when your heart is carrying too much for too long. The judge paused for a moment. The courtroom stood absolutely still, leaving room for her to breathe, to cry, to shatter. Finally Christine stood. She looked at the letter one last time, kissed it softly and whispered, "I'm sorry," before returning to her seat. Janelle reached out and grabbed her hand. The two women held on to each other, like they were holding on to the last piece of their shared pain. The judge leaned forward again, his voice quiet but steady. "The pain said in this room is not a weapon," he declared. "It is a truth. And truth, however burdensome, is the only thing that can free hearts." The room fell into silence. The walls absorbed every utterance that had been made. Kody looked at the ground, but his mind was no longer in the room. He was reliving all the conversations he didn't have, all the hugs he didn't share, all the messages he didn't respond to. He heard Garrison's chuckle in his head. He saw the instances he decided to walk away rather than walking towards him. His chest throbbed, his throat constricted. For the first time, he couldn't hide behind cop-outs. This was the truth, and it was louder than his silence ever had been. Christine leaned on Janelle, and Janelle leaned back. Even Mary, seated just behind them, brushed away a tear she'd been struggling to contain. This wasn't testimony. This was confession. This was a family at last saying out loud what they should have said a long time ago. This, the judge whispered, is the pain no one talked about. And today, it has finally been talked. The courtroom did not applaud. It did not gasp. It simply breathed. Together for the first time. But beneath that collective breath was a profound, unshakable truth. Nothing they said would bring back Garrison. But perhaps, just perhaps, it would prevent another silence from claiming another life. The silence that came after Christine testified wasn't quiet, it was stifling. The kind that weighs on your chest and won't allow you to take a breath. Tears were poised in the air. Janelle held Garrison Brown's photo all the tighter. Christine's torn letter remained on the stand. A fragment of Garrison's voice, heard at last. And then the judge said something more. His tone soothing, too soft for a courtroom. "Mr. Brown. Kody Brown. It's time." All heads turned toward him. All hearts suspended their breath. Kody didn't stir initially. His hands were folded together in his lap. His jaw was clenched. His eyes, once proud and often boisterous, gazed at the wooden floor, as if the truth itself resided within the cracks. For years he had been the voice of restraint. The man who always had a plan. A man who believed leadership equated strength and silence. But today, all of that did not count. Today he was not the head of a family. He was a father who lost his son. The judge spoke softly. "Again, Mr. Brown. Please take the stand." Kody eased himself to his feet. His chair groaned behind him, a tiny sound that resonated like thunder in the charged room. His walk was lopsided, heavy. Each step towards the witness stand piled on the guilt of every skipped conversation, every unreturned call, every time he had picked pride over presence. He didn't glance at Janelle. He didn't glance at Christine. He didn't even glance at the judge. He simply sat there and gazed at his hands. The bailiff requested him to swear in. Kody's voice caught when he barely whispered, "I do." The judge leaned forward a little. "Mr. Brown, you may speak." For a few seconds Kody had nothing to say. He simply breathed. Slow, unsteady, loud. The microphone captured every uneven breath, every shudder in his chest. At last, he spoke. I thought I was doing my best. His words were little more than a whisper, but everyone heard them, because everyone was anticipating them. I thought, he went on, his throat constricting, that to be strong was to be aloof. That if I remained concentrated, if I remained unyielding, everything would just fall into place. He smiled gently. A wounding, bitter smile. I was mistaken. Janelle shut her eyes as those words hit home. Kody's hands trembled as he held onto the edge of the witness stand. His knuckles were drained of color. His breath caught again. I didn't realize how far away I was drifting from him. From all of them. I thought he'd be all right. I thought Garrison didn't need me as much as he used to. A tear rolled down his face. He didn't brush it away. He didn't attempt to be strong anymore. He did contact me. Kody spoke softly. I recall the messages. The phone calls. The things he attempted to tell in between. And I told myself that I'd address it later. I told myself that there was time. He broke a little bit, squeezed his eyes shut, attempting to keep back a deluge that was already spilling out. There wasn't time. The judge's gaze softened. Even he could sense the burden of a father's remorse infusing the air. Kody went on, his voice shaking but steadier. Now, when you're a dad, you remind yourself that your children know you love them, that you don't need to say it every day, that they'll just get it. He shook his head patiently, as if rebuking the man he once was. But children need to hear it. They need to see it. They need to feel it. And I didn't give him that. Not the way he deserved. Janelle gave a gentle sob. Christine pressed her hand against her chest. Even Robin Brown, way in the back, covered her mouth with shaking fingers. Kody's voice became hoarser, deeper. I can make excuses. I can say I was busy, that I was trying to hold everything together. But the truth is, I let pride get in the way of love. A pin could have fallen in that room, and it would have been audible to everyone. I thought I'd have more time to fix it, Kody said. But time, it doesn't wait, and now I'll never hear him call me Dad again. I'll never get another chance to tell him I'm sorry. His shoulders shook, his breaths turned uneven. He lowered his head, and for the first time, the room saw a father, not a man defending himself. The judge gave him a moment. The whole courtroom was silent, but it was no longer a chilly silence. It was warm, heavy, with collective hurt. Garrison should have had more, Kody said at last. More than I showed him. More than my pride. More than my silence. He raised his head gradually. For the first time since he sat, his eyes were reddened, watered, exhausted, and he looked straight at Janelle. You tried, he told her quietly, his voice shaking. You tried to bring us near. And I pushed you away. I thought I was doing the right thing. I wasn't. Janelle glared back at him. Not with hate but with an endless sadness. Tears ran down her face. And then Kody turned to Christine. You saw him. He breathed. You saw him falling between the cracks. And I said to myself it was okay. That he was okay. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to see what was going on. Christine's jaw shook. She swiped at her eyes, but did not glance away. I should have listened, Kody whispered. I should have walked towards him, instead of away from him. I should have been his father, not just a man in the same family. The judge adjusted in his seat, touched by the raw emotion in Kody's voice. It wasn't practiced, it wasn't strained. It was truth gushing out of a man who had exhausted all his excuses. Kody gazed up at the judge. I know there isn't a sentence you can give me that will be worse than the one I already live with. Every night, when I'm lying there and close my eyes, I hear him. I see the last messages. The last moments. And I wish I'd just said, I love you, son. The words broken halfway through. The whole court seemed to contain that sound, as if the fractured words were shards of his soul. He covered his face with his hands, for an instant his shoulders heaving with muffled sobs. No one stopped him. Not the judge. Not the bailiff. Not the family. When finally he dropped his hands from his face. It was wet, his voice small. I can't bring him back. I can't make up for what I did. But if there's anything I can do now, it's to say this truth aloud. To say what should have been said when he was alive. He breathed deeply that shook through the microphone. I failed him, Kody said flatly. and I will bear that for the rest of my life. No legal term, no dramatic twist, no headline could describe that kind of pain. It wasn't about guilt in the courtroom anymore. It was about the weight in his heart. The judge leaned forward slightly, his voice soft. Mr. Brown, what you've said here today is something many parents never find the strength to say. Kody nodded slowly. His lips trembled, but he didn't speak. Silence can't be punished by law, the judge went on, but it can break up families, and occasionally it can kill. Those were the words that cut through the room. Kody dipped his head once more, and the tears flowed again, not the boisterous ones, the silent ones that creep in when the reality finally seeps deep. Janelle reached out and put a shaking hand on the photo of Garrison. She muttered something to herself. Christine quietly pressed the letter against her chest. Folded. Even Robin, still holding her tissue, made a soft sobbing sound. Mary put her head down, her fingers clasped together, her lips moving in a silent prayer. Can't turn back the clock, Kody stated one last time. But I can do it now, and I can do it each day for the remainder of my life. Garrison, I love you, I always did. I just didn't tell you enough. The courtroom fell silent. For the first time that day, the anguish in the room wasn't just oppressive. It was collective. The judge nodded slightly. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Kody stood up slowly. His legs shook but he didn't care. Walking back to his seat, his face was white, his eyes bloodshot, but something within him had opened up. No longer hidden. No longer buried. Janelle didn't say a word. As he went by her, she didn't need to. The hurt between them was larger than words. Kody sat down heavily, his shaking hand still. He was lighter, but emptier at the same time. The judge breathed softly and looked at the clerk. But before proceeding, he stopped, letting the seriousness of Kody's words sink in. He knew, everyone knew, that this wasn't just testimony. This was a father's heart confession. Outside the courthouse, the world kept spinning. Cars driving, people smiling, sun shining, but within, time moved differently. Slowly, gently. And there quietly, the truth, ugly, messy, raw, had been finally spoken. The bailiff came at a slow pace, as if each step weighed the world. Held gently in his hands, covered by white fabric, was a framed photograph of Garrison Brown. It was not a photo, it was a memory, a moment suspended in time. The judge nodded wordlessly. The cue, the bailiff placed the frame on the witness stand, looking at the whole courtroom. And with that, the atmosphere shifted. The picture captured Garrison in the sunlight. Big and sincere smile, like a person who still thought the world was good. His eyes sparkled with warmth. Warmth he never tire of. The smile was vibrant, alive and youthful, something that belonged nowhere else other than a teary courtroom. A sharp broken sob escaped from somewhere in the back row. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to shatter the stillness. The judge cleared his throat, softly. I want everyone to look, he said. His voice wasn't commanding this time. It was quiet, heavy. Look at his face. Look at that smile. This is not a piece of evidence. This is a soul that should have had more time. Janelle's hand shot to her mouth. She gasped as though the breath had been knocked from her body. She'd looked at this picture 1,000 times before, but having it here, these cold courtroom lights, was different. It wasn't a memory any longer. It was a reminder of what was lost. She whispered, nearly choking on the words. He loved that day. Her hands trembled. That was the day we went for a hike. He laughed all the way up. He kept saying how warm the sun felt on his skin. He turned to me and said, Mom, I've never been this happy. Her voice broke at the end, and the sound of it reverberated through every corner of the courtroom. Christine leaned forward and put a shaking hand on Janelle's shoulder. Her own face was wet with tears. He was so full of life, she whispered. He never wanted to hurt anyone. The judge bowed his head. Let's take a minute of silence, he said. And then, the world fell silent. It wasn't a normal silence. It was heavy, thick. It hung over each chest in the room. Even the lights felt dim under its weight. Strangers, people who had never laid eyes on Garrison, wiped their faces to remove the tears. Those of us who knew him felt our chests collapse. Each breath a reminder he no longer breathed. The judge's voice returned, softer than initially. "This photograph," he said slowly, "is not here to fault. It is here to remind us of fact. A young man should have matured, should have pursued ambitions, should have constructed a future. But silence and suffering took that away from him." Cody's head fell lower. His fists were clenched over the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles whitened. He didn't glance at anyone. He couldn't. Janelle was overcome with sobs. She could no longer keep inside. Her body shuddered with each gasp. Christine leaned forward, putting an arm around her even as tears streamed down her face. Robin Brown, a few seats away, covered her mouth with her hand. Her mascara was running, but she didn't care. "I wish," she breathed, barely loud enough to hear. "I wish we had done more." The judge spoke to her softly. "Wishing doesn't change the past," he said, his voice steady and sorrowful. "But it can change what happens next." That sentence hit like a hammer. Not because it was boisterous, but because it was the truth. Everyone in that room realized they were a part of something that couldn't be undone. Regret was filling every seat, pain was etched on every face. The judge descended from his bench. He never did that. Judges are meant to remain detached, impartial. But this was no ordinary case. He stood next to the picture, staring at Garrison's grin for a lengthy period of time. He then faced the family. "Do you see it?" he whispered. "Do you see the light in his face? That's what families are supposed to guard. That's what love is supposed to cling to. But sometimes, we become so mired in our own suffering, our own pride, that we don't hear the whispered pleas." There was a silence that fell again over the room. Kody finally lifted his head. His eyes were puffy and red, and his face was damp with tears that he no longer bothered to wipe away. He looked at the picture as if it were the last remnant of his son he could ever hold on to. "He called me that night," Kody whispered. "I didn't answer. I said I'd call him back later. But later never happened." His voice cracked, and the room froze. That one sentence felt like a blade, cutting through everyone's heart. Christine began to cry harder, shaking her head slowly. Mary closed her eyes and whispered a prayer under her breath. Janelle let out a quiet scream, the kind that doesn't echo through the air, but rips through the soul. Robin wiped her face and whispered again. "I'm sorry, Garrison." The judge breathed slowly. "This," he said, nodding toward the picture, "is not about blame. This is about the moments we can never get back. Every call we miss, every word we never say, every hug we thought to give tomorrow." His voice wasn't boisterous, but it held gravity like stone. A man near the back row murmured, "This never should have occurred." Another woman clasped her hands in a prayer that was wordless. The courthouse, which had once been constructed for justice and legislation, was now a venue of sorrow, honest, open, and genuine. The judge stroked the edge of the frame softly with his fingers. "See him," he said once more. "This boy isn't here to give testimony. He isn't here to share his story. So the only thing that can speak about him now is this smile, and what is true about it." Then he requested the bailiff to dim the lights a bit, leaving a gentle beam centered on the photo. It wasn't sensational. It was subdued, reverent. The whole room gazed at that one frame. A boy grinning into sunlight, captured forever. Janelle stood up gradually, her legs shaking under her, and moved towards the witness stand. Her hands shook when she reached out and lightly touched the photo. She trembled. "I was supposed to protect you," she whispered. "I was supposed to keep you safe. And I didn't. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Her legs threatened to collapse, and Christine hurried to support her. But Janelle didn't turn away. She dropped her forehead against the glass of the frame, her tears tracing down like raindrops on a window. Christine drew nearer. She whispered, "He knew you loved him." "He did. However, the fact is, love doesn't necessarily end hurt." Kody stood beside. Slowly, almost agonizingly so. With every step toward that photograph was a step through years of distance and lost opportunities. When he reached the counter, He didn't say a word initially. He just glared. His lips quivered. His chest lifted and fell as if he were keeping everything inside he had buried deep. I should have been there, he whispered, eventually. I should have listened. I should have answered that call. Then he went down on his knees, standing there in front of his son's picture. The sound of Kody shattering wasn't boisterous, but it was the loudest sound in that courtroom. Robin stood too, edging her way slowly over, tears running down her face. She reached out and put her hand on Janelle's back, murmuring, "I'm so sorry, I wish I could take it all back." For the first time in years, they didn't fight. None of them blamed one another. They were standing around that picture, shattered together in grief. They were given time by the judge. No one hurried the moment. Some families, the judge eventually said, his tone gentle, unite in happiness. Others find their way back only through sorrow. I hope this isn't the end of your story. I hope it's just the start of healing. The bailiff stood wordlessly by the door, his eyes cast down. Even the court reporter had misty eyes. It wasn't a trial anymore. It was a moment of truth. The judge looked back at the courtroom and delivered his words slowly. This has nothing to do with laws today. This is about a lesson, one that's not written in ink, but in blood, in silence, in tears. It's about a family that lost a son between their fingers. And now, this picture is all that's left. He backed away, his gaze on Janelle and Kody. The world does not give us second chances with life. It only grants us the opportunity to alter how we live afterward. Janelle nodded weakly, still holding the frame. Kody rested against the stand, his tears flowing openly. Christine and Robin stood together near them, not as adversaries, but as a broken family that was attempting to cohere. The photograph stayed immobile, radiating in the soft light, and in that room, drenched in guilt, love, regret, and silence, everyone realized something simple yet strong. Garrison's smile would never disappear from their hearts, and neither would the burden of their silence. The courtroom was more than a four-walled room anymore. It was as if it were breathing. Everyone within could sense it, the heaviness of truth, the bite of regret, and the tentative hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this was where things started to change. The judge slowly returned to his bench, his footsteps resonating in the quiet. No one whispered, no one fidgeted in their seat. Everyone's eyes were trained on him, but more significantly, everyone's hearts were trained on the picture, still shining softly at the head of the room. The judge paused, breathing deeply, and his hands shook a little as he pushed his glasses up. This, he spoke slowly, deliberately, is not a judgment that can be penned. No sentence I impose here will restore what's lost. No sentence can repair the quiet that constructed these walls between you. His tone was low, not of anger, but of something approximating sorrow, something which weighed every word. He glanced over at Kody Brown, still seated close to the stand, head in his hands, his face smeared with tears. And then he looked over at Janelle Brown, still clutching the picture of Garrison Brown to her chest, like it was the last remnant of her heart. Christine Brown, Robin Brown and Mary sat together with them, standing in their sorrow for the first time in a very long time. I've adjudicated a lot of cases, went on the judge, but few ever seemed as much like this one. Few ever left as much silence, and as much truth in a room. He stopped talking. The room was silent. You could hear somebody blow their nose from way in the back, the squeak of a chair as somebody adjusted slightly, and the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. When a life gets lost, the judge told him, the world doesn't stop. It goes on, but for those around that life, time stands still. You live within that one moment, again and again, wondering what you might have done different, what you might have said, what you might have repaired. Kody's lips quivered. He slowly raised his eyes, their exhaustion, redness, and guilt speaking volumes. Janelle gripped the photograph tightly, as if releasing it would mean losing him all over again. The judge drew a deep breath. You see, a courtroom can convict crimes. It can sentence, but it cannot mend broken hearts. It cannot erase the missed calls. It cannot restore the words that were never said. Christine made a small silent sob. Mary clasped her hand. Robin shook, not with fright, but with the unbearable burden of all the unspoken words among them all. The judge drew forward, and so he spoke softly. Today the verdict isn't mine to deliver, it's yours. It's the verdict of your hearts. It's the verdict of each of you who will have to live with this truth for the rest of your lives. He turned toward Kody. Kody Brown, you've spoken of your regret. But regret is not enough if it stays silent. Regret must turn into change, into something real. Kody swallowed hard. His voice was quiet, almost broken. I'll live with this for the rest of my life, he whispered. I can't fix the past, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor him. The judge nodded. And that is the start of healing. Not excuses, not anger, just truth. He turned his attention to Janelle next. And you, Mrs. Brown, you have borne this pain alone for long enough, but you no longer have to bear it alone. Janelle's hands trembled as she clamped the frame on her chest. She couldn't speak. All she could do was nod and allow tears to drop down her face. The judge looked at Christine and Mary. And the rest of you, this family has been broken. You've wasted years apart, mired in old pain, old fights, and old hurts. But today you stand before me together, not as adversaries, not as competitors, but as individuals who loved one soul. That in itself is something to hold on to. Robin's head was low, and for the first time in years, her voice broke. We failed him, she whispered. All of us. The judge didn't argue. He merely spoke. Then don't fail each other now. The words crashed, like a gentle but firm wave. No shouting, no over-the-top gestures, just the still truth no one could avoid. The judge rose. I adjourn this session, but this tale doesn't have an end here. This isn't a juridical conclusion. It's a start. What follows next depends on you, all of you. He banged the gavel once. Bang. The sound resonated in the courtroom like thunder. But rather than the sense of something ending, it felt like the beginning of something they didn't fully grasp yet. Kody sat still, his eyes fixed on the ground. He was empty, as though all the words had scraped something raw on the inside of him. He had been stubborn for years, boisterous, convinced he knew everything. But sitting here in front of this picture, he was small, so small. Janelle blotted her tears and whispered something no one else could hear. I'll never forget to say your name, Garrison, I swear. Christine grasped her hand. You won't have to, she said softly. We'll keep him alive in everything we do. Robin came forward slowly. There was no rage anymore in Janelle's eyes, just weariness, suffering, but also a still, brittle willingness not to fight anymore. I'm sorry, Robin whispered. I can't change anything, but I wish I could. Janelle stared at her for a long time, and then, rather than turning away, she just nodded. We all do. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. The family congregated around the photo. The courtroom was almost deserted now. The onlookers and reporters had slipped out quietly, some rubbing their own eyes. Only the family remained. The silence was different. It had been heavy and cutting earlier. Now it was muted. A silence that did not shriek with accusation, but breathed with remembrance. Mary reached over and touched the rim of the photo. He was so full of light, she whispered. It hurts me the way it turned dark for him. Kody shut his eyes. I did not see it. I should have seen it. A father should know. Janelle's voice trembled, then steadied. We all missed it. All of us. Christine moved into position. Then let's stop missing each other too. For years they had not stood that close. No screaming, no finger pointing, just silent understanding. The judge had gone back to his chambers. But his final words hung in the air like a shadow. Some punishments don't come from a courtroom. They come from the heart. Kody rose to his feet. His knees were weak, his chest constricting. He took one step forward. In front of the picture, he put his hand on the glass, his palm over his son's smile. I'll talk to you every day, he whispered. I'll live better. I'll love louder. I'll do what I should have done when you were here. Janelle moved beside him, placing her hand over his. Christine followed, then Mary. Then after a quiet breath, Robin joined them. 5 hands rested against the same photo. 5 hearts broke together. 5 souls silently promised to never let this pain turn to silence again. Outside there was business as usual. Cars traveled along the street. The sky was gray, but gentle shafts of light broke through the clouds and painted the courthouse steps with gold. Inside, something changed. It wasn't set. The pain didn't just go away. But there was something different, a string of connection between people who had been torn apart for far too long. Janelle whispered, "He's with us." Christine nodded. "Always." Robin wiped her eyes. "We can't bring him back. But we can ensure that nobody ever feels that alone again." Mary whispered, "That's the real verdict." And in the silence after that, Kody breathed deeply. Not because the hurting was over, but because for the first time in a long while, he wasn't bearing it alone. The camera would close in on the photo. Garrison's smile still bright, still warm, still eternal. The family's hands slowly lowered. But their hearts didn't. A soft voice over-echoed the lesson that everyone in that room would carry forever. Some stories don't close with a gavel. Some close with a heartbeat. Some stories remind us that silence can be louder than words, and love has to be louder than silence. This was one of those stories. This wasn't a matter of guilt or innocence. This was a matter of love, of family, of the words we don't speak until it's too late. So speak them now. Speak them while you still can. And when the doors of the courtroom swung shut behind them, the light came down across Garrison's picture for the last time, as if he was looking, as if he were home.